So, does anybody have any limiting beliefs that they would like to change today? Nope. Okay, class is over. Good job, everybody. Woohoo! All right. So while you're thinking of it, you might want to know what a limiting belief is. Beliefs are filters. They are not true. Even a good belief, even a powerful, empowering belief, not true. But if you believe it, all of a sudden it filters the world according to that belief. And I wanted to read a little something, and I'm glad my dad's on, because my dad is an above-the-knee amputee. And, you know, when you think about his life, he was one of, I don't know, 7 or 8 kids. I lost track of all my aunts and uncles. And my dad he had this health issue when he was a kid. He got an infection. He got a scratch on his ankle, and it got infected. And it was before antibiotics. And the infection kind of really messed up his body. Part of his body stopped growing. One leg was shorter than the other, a couple of his fingers, and he had tons of operations. And when he was 16, they eventually amputated his leg. Now, my dad was the sickliest one in the family. But he's 89, and he has one sibling left. And she's younger than him. But he's in way better shape than her. Right? He is one of the healthiest people I know. He's got a totally flat tummy. He swims 3 times a week when the pool's open. I mean, I'm talking about, Susan, stop. It's not about you all the time. Jeez. You're hot, baby. Come on, relax. You look fine. You know, I have a little tummy. I'm working on it. But the bottom line is, when he was in his 40s, he changed. He changed his life. And because he had been sick, he realized that if he didn't take care of himself, he was going to be a basket case by the time he was old, right? So he quit smoking, he started reading and researching health and nutrition, and he started really changing his life. And so he's been one of my main inspirations, because I look at him and I go, there's a guy that changed. He actually changed. And a lot of people don't seem to want to, you know? But he did it. And so one of the things that I was reading just last night was a neuroscientist whose last name is Ramachandran. He's an Indian guy, but I think he lives in this country. And he was interested in working with people who were having phantom pain in their missing limbs. And he was curious about, you know, what part of the brain was still causing that, because they literally felt the limb that wasn't there as if it was there, which is kind of a belief. And so he was a big fan. He was at UC San Diego. That's where he was. And so he came up with some very simple experiments that didn't cost big bucks, didn't need big machinery, just like a box with a mirror. And he would have the person put their good arm in the box and their what was their left of their amputated arm, and so there was a mirror inside, so they literally could move their good arm, and it showed up as if they were moving their non-existent arm. Very simple experiment. And he started really making some progress with that. So let me just read this chapter. Using a mirror that he had in his office, he proceeded to construct his own apparatus. He took a cardboard box with the lid removed and made 2 armholes in the front of the box. He then positioned the upright mirror inside of it. Patients were instructed to place their good arm through one hole and their severed arm right up to the other hole. They were to maneuver the mirror until the image of their good arm was seen in the position where the other arm should be. In moving their good arm and seeing it move in the position of the severed one, almost instantly, these patients experienced an alleviation of the feeling of paralysis that they had been having. Most of the patients who took the box home with them and practiced with it, notice practiced with it, took it home and practiced with it. That's a very important, subtle message that I'm going to be repeating for the rest of my life, probably. were able to unlearn the paralysis, much to their relief. Once again, the meaning of this discovery was profound. Not only was the brain more plastic, but the senses were also much more interconnected than previously imagined. The brain did not consist of modules for each sense. Instead, they overlapped. In this case, pure visual stimuli had altered the sense of touch and sensation. But beyond that, this experiment also called into question the whole notion of pain. Pain, it seemed, and this is the key kicker right here, pain, it seemed, was a kind of opinion the body rendered on what it was experiencing on its own health. This opinion could be tricked or manipulated, as the mere experiment had shown. That, to me, is pretty darn cool. Where it's in subsequent work, he was able to locate neurological damage to the part of their brains that create or control our sense of body image. This damage had occurred at birth or very early on. This meant that the brain could create a body image in a perfectly healthy person that was highly irrational. It seemed as well that our sense of self is far more subjective and fluid than we had thought. If our experience of our own body is something constructed in the brain and can go haywire, then perhaps our sense of self is also something of a construction or illusion, one that we can create to suit our purposes and one that can malfunction as well. The implications here go beyond neuroscience. So, the whole cool thing about the NLP Belief Change is that you can literally change who you are based on your beliefs. And I had a belief, as you guys probably already know, I was very shy. And I can relate to Susan because at age 40, for the first time, I was literally out in the world alone. I went right from mommy and daddy to being married and having kids when I was in my early 20s. So at age 40, I was living by myself for the first time in an apartment, in a very large apartment building in a former silk factory in Manchester, Connecticut. And there are hundreds of people within feet of me. Close proximity. I would see them in the elevator, but I didn't know how to make friends. How do you make friends? How do you make friends as a grown-up? And I went to a bookstore one day and I pulled this book off of I would go to the self-help section because I couldn't afford a therapist. So I'd go to the self-help section. I pulled this little brown book off, which is Changing Belief Systems with NLP by Robert Dilts. And I was desperate. I was willing to do the exercises. So, and he starts the book out with talking about his mom, who was a nurse who had cancer, and the doctors gave her essentially a death sentence. They said, go home and get your affairs in order. You're not going to live more than 3 months. And he was an NLP practitioner, and he's one of the best in the world. And he said to his mom, "Do you feel like playing? You want to see if you can beat this prognosis?" And she was open to it. And so he worked with her and changed her beliefs about her illness and about her diagnosis. And basically she ended up outliving most of her doctors. But because she was a nurse, what the doctor said had such weight because all her life she had been following the orders, the leadership of doctors. So her belief system was all about, I have to believe these people, and if they say I'm going to die, then I'm going to die, right? That was a belief. And he was able to use this pattern to help her interrupt it. So I was shy, and I did the exercise, and I'd gotten the book, and I had ordered a whole set of NLP training cassettes. This is still the days when cassettes were used. Yes, by God, it was a long time ago. We had these little things called cassettes. And I was waiting for them to come, and I was going through this book, and I did the exercise, and no sooner had I finished the exercise when the doorbell rang, and it was the UPS guy, and he was delivering to the entire building. And having made this change, I went downstairs, and I'm chatting with people and saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And there was a very attractive young woman there who I wouldn't have been able to look at before. you know, because I was shy and I was, you know, kind of brought up to think that that was wrong to look at an attractive woman with attraction in my head. But I was like, hey, what are you getting? It's kind of like Christmas over here, isn't it? I just like was myself, which is a very bubbly, outgoing person when I'm not shy, you know, and I had a good time. But it didn't seem weird. It didn't seem like, oh, I am now being outgoing. I will force myself to make conversation. It wasn't like that. It was just like, hey, what are you getting? I'm getting some, you know, self-help tapes on NLP. It's like, wow, this is cool. Are you getting sex toys? What are you getting? You know, it's just like, it was fun. We had fun. It was great. And I was like, getting to know people right there. And from that point on, I started getting to know my neighbors. And there was a couple across the hall who, she worked at the local Parks and Recreation. She ended up booking me, you know, for a kid gig at her summer camp. So, I mean, it literally paid for itself to order those tapes or to buy this book, you know. So I was like, okay, this worked. And it worked faster and more congruently than anything I've ever tried to change in my life. And it was like, I've got to learn everything I can about this. So I want to share this with you guys in hopefully a little bit more detail than I did back in the spring. So where's my eraser? So we're going to erase the ties because I need the whole board. And I love this whiteboard because essentially, as you look at the whiteboard, this represents your mental movie screen. And we have stuff that's kind of in this space in front of us in our mind. It's in our imagination, but it affects us. For example, foods we like usually center, you know. And I stopped eating ice cream every day, all day, by simply moving ice cream over to where I have frozen yogurt in my internal representation. We represent the world to ourselves because the world is not in us, right? I mean, I'm looking at Susan, I'm looking at Ed, I'm looking at Ursula, but my experience of seeing you is happening inside. Light is bouncing off of you, going through my eyes, and it's being made sense of. This input, this data is being turned into something in my mind. I don't know if you guys are really here or not.
Just a figment of your imagination.
You seem to be here, you know. And our five senses, if you think of your body as a spaceship, you know, we have an array of sensors, and we're sitting in the cockpit going, okay, what does the kinesthetic sensor say? It says hot, okay, or cold. And what does the visual sensor say? It says bright, color, movement. Okay, what does the auditory sensor say? Sound. You know, there are vibrations that are reaching us, and we are making sense of them. They're not, quote unquote, the real thing. In NLP, we have a saying called the map is not the territory. But most of our life, we think it is. And that's where we get tangled up in our stories and our beliefs, filtering out what we can allow in. So I had this belief that I was shy, and until I changed it, that was the dominating rule of my day and my life, and that's how I behaved, as if I was shy, because I believed I was. Back in the spring, an old limiting belief came up that no one wants to hear your music, Mark. You know, and that to me was like, okay, well, I've got to clear that because that's stopping me from taking risks of being in places where people might not like my music or might have something better to do on a freaking Tuesday evening than to drop everything and run over and hear me play, right? So, and I don't want to just do my music anyway. I'm working on a bigger level where my music and my message are working together. So, but in order to take the next step, I had to get rid of that belief. So tonight, for you guys, I'm going to hopefully walk you guys through clearing a limiting belief and installing an empowered belief. All right? So, are you ready? I'm going to stop this.